most of my friends moved to LA, and I am from New York. I wanted to be in New York City, so I went back to New York to intern for free, much to the horror of my family, at Tribeca Productions in New York. I had interned there in between junior and senior year that summer. I had made friends and I liked it there. It was a cool little company. It's Robert De Niro's company. And I just figured, well, I just kind of hang around for a little while, make myself indispensable, and hopefully they'll give me a job. That lasted a couple months, and then I ended up in a job working for Robert De Niro personally, which, when you're 22 and broke in New York, is like having a key to the city. It was amazing. I loved it. It didn't pay much, but it was a lot of fun. The thing is, these assistant jobs, as a lot of you will find out, they're a great entry-level way into the business and to learn. But if you're planning on being a writer, they don't necessarily give you the lifestyle you need to have a lot of time to write. Especially when it's a high-profile person like someone like Robert De Niro. 5 days a week was usually 6 or 7. I was tired. I didn't have a lot of time to write. I remember talking to Evan about a year into the job, and he gave me really, really important advice in my life that stuck with me. He said, "A year is a valuable thing to waste in this business." And he was right, because I wanted to write, and I was barely getting any writing done. What was I doing if the job was not leading towards the career I was hoping to get? I was very fortunate in that I left the job I had working 7 days a week for De Niro and started a kind of part-time job working for Tribeca Productions. And it was a lot of mindless busy work of archiving photos and archiving props and not anything I ever had to use my brain on. And I worked just enough to pay the bills, pay a little rent, have something to eat, and then just used all my time to work, to write otherwise. And that's, we talked about this earlier today, it's a tricky thing if you want to write. Figuring out when you leave here, do you take a job like, say, PA on set of a movie in LA? And now you have a job in the industry. You're working on a real movie, but your hours are so crazy, you're going to have to find time to write in the middle of the night or your one day off on weekends. Or do you go and get a job at a bookstore, at a bar, at whatever, and then you have a ton of time to write, but you feel like you're not a part of the business? And everyone is different. It's sort of a question you kind of have to answer for yourself. But the answer is whatever's going to allow you to have the most amount of time to write, because that's the thing, the main thing you guys control. Even with that part-time job that gave me a lot of time to write, I did not sell, I did not get a paycheck for writing until I think I was 28. And I was writing pretty steadily up until then. The best thing to come out of my internship while I was still here was I made a friend who went to a different school, but we, in our early 20s, just started talking about movies we both liked, and we were both trying to be writers, and we thought, let's just try to write something together and just see if we can. And there's a way to push each other to work faster and better. And the first thing we wrote together, we didn't really know what we were doing, but we outlined extensively and then just divided up scenes. We didn't write together in the same room. You take a few scenes, I take a few scenes, and just email each other back and forth. And that's pretty much actually to this day, he and I write together most of the time, still the process. He lives in LA, I live in New York. And even then, by the way, still many years of doing that until we eventually had a couple of samples, tried to find representation, agent, manager, someone who would fight for us. We met managers in New York they're a little weird, but they liked us, and we thought, oh, it's cool, someone's paying attention to us. They mostly represented science fiction and fantasy screenwriters, which I'm not. But I thought, oh, cool, okay, I'll be their only client who does comedy and relationships and that stuff. That turned out to be a really bad idea because they just didn't understand those genres, and the movies that were important to them were not important to me, and vice versa. And it was probably 3-4 months wasted with them. I learned the value of sort of partnering with people who get you and you get them, and it really is a people business at the end of the day, and about connecting with those people. I left those managers. It was a year, again, another year, I had no representation, and one day my phone rang. I still lived in New York, but I would go out to LA a lot to see friends I made here who were out in LA, and just network, just try to meet people. Unbeknownst to me, a friend had passed along one of my scripts to another friend, to another friend, to another friend, and my phone rang one day, and my managers that I still have to this day. And they were young guys, a few years older than me. They were young and hungry, and their favorite movies were my favorite movies. And when they read my samples, they were comparing it to the movies that I thought about when I was working on them. They understood me, and it just felt like the right fit in a people way, which is probably why I'm still with them today. Even then, they sent out all samples of screenplays, and one of them was 500 Days of Summer, and no one bought any of them. No one wanted anything to do with our writing. But we did get some meetings. Just low-level people in LA at production companies and studios who just wanted to have a coffee or give us a bottle of water and talk for 20 minutes. And as ridiculous as I thought those meetings were then, driving around LA all day, taking these kind of general meetings that weren't leading to work, they mattered. All of these people you can meet in the business, it can help you. It really is about forging those relationships. It's funny now because a lot of the people I work who I met then for a simple coffee 8 years ago, they run those companies now. They started as the low-level person, and they're now the boss. In other cases, it was meeting someone, and back then, and just hitting it off a little bit, those low-level people, they decide what their boss reads that weekend. You're not going to meet the big producers at a company when I didn't know anyone and a couple little samples, but it's the people at the bottom of the pyramid out in LA who will whisper in their boss's ear about you. Put your script at the top of the pile for the weekend. Those little baby steps start to matter. You just take a lot of these little informal meetings and try to meet as many people. And that was now a year into no one wanting any of my screenplays. And I went into a meeting at Watermark Productions, which is Mark Waters' production company. Mark Waters directed Freaky Friday and Mean Girls up to that point. It was kind of a big deal off of Mean Girls. I was in a meeting with him. He was important, and I was very much not important. But his low-level person had read 500 Days and liked it, and had read a couple other samples. And she said, tell me what else you have. Give me some other ideas. And always, before going into these meetings, I would, because I trusted my managers, I would talk to them and ask them, can I give them ideas? Should I not? What do I, you have to rely on these people. And I trusted them. And they would say, yeah, these are good people to talk to. Just have coffee and hear what they have to say, but don't. And you never know. So they gave me the green light, and I went into this meeting and just thinking it was like 50 others I had taken where I'm just having bottled water and talking about nothing. She asked for a couple of ideas, and I threw a few out there. She didn't like any of them. And these were the ideas that my friend and I, we could probably, maybe not a formal pitch, but we could talk about them for 10 minutes, let's say, and have lots of ideas. She didn't like any of the ideas. She kept saying, give me more, give me more. Finally, we have this one last idea that we called Starfish. I don't know if any of you guys remember the movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow. There's like a train, and she misses the train, and then her life turns out one way, and it would have been another way if she had made the train. And anyway, we had this thing called Starfish. The idea being a guy looks back on his life and the 5 big regrets he has, and gets to see how his life would have played out if he had chosen another way. And we called it Starfish because the starfish has 5 arms, and if you cut off an arm and throw it in the ocean, it'll grow back a new arm. Everything I just said, which was like 3 or 4 sentences on that idea, she was like, great, we're doing that. What? She said, we're going to talk to Fox in 2 days. She said her old assistant was now an executive at Fox. Again, it's about just these relationships. And they're looking for a project to do together, so let's get on the phone. And we said, well, that's all we have. There's no pitch. There's no movie. So then it's okay. We just want to work together. This'll do. We got on the phone a couple days later with maybe 2 or 3 additional sentences, but like, that's it. The woman from Fox said, great, we're doing it. And that was our first writing job. I was, I think, 28. I probably started taking screenplays seriously here when I was 19 or 20, so almost a decade. Funny thing is, 2 funny things, within 6 to 8 months of us selling the pitch for Starfish to Fox, every one of our old scripts that had circulated, that everyone had passed on, all of them but one, sold. Because in the baby steps of a career, we went from, oh, they're just those guys who had a couple scripts that were whatever, to they're working writers. They sold that pitch to Fox, so now we should take more seriously those other things they had. Fox Searchlight passed on buying 500 Days, and then after we'd sold the other thing, they were like, we want this. Nothing changed in the screenplay at all, but the perception of us. The other funny thing is, the day after we sold the pitch, we found out from a friend who knew a marine biologist, if you cut off the arm of a starfish and throw it back in the ocean, it dies. But it didn't matter because it sounded really good. And they loved that, and they were like, that's it. Like, and sometimes it's not what something is, it's what something sounds like.
Anybody have a question they want to ask?
Do you ever feel like if you had moved to LA in the beginning, it would have been like a quicker process to selling something, or do you really think that New York wasn't a disadvantage? Because I'm from
Oh, that is a good question. You're from,
like,
oh, okay, yeah.
Did you move to LA or not?
I think, I knew growing up I wanted to live in New York City. I grew up in and around the city, and I wanted to do something creative. And I knew I'd be happy in the city. At the time, my girlfriend at that time was going to med school in New York, so there was a little bit of like, unless I was ending this relationship, which eventually ended, but at the time I was like, I had free room and board at the NYU Medical School. I was staying in New York. I will say, even being in New York, I made frequent trips out to LA because you need to have a presence out there. You need to meet as many people as possible. Yeah. And if you live here, be out there. If you live out there, come back to New York sometimes and meet people, because there has been a shift. There is more of the business in New York now than there was 15 years ago. But again, a lot of the decision makers, especially in like the bigger movies, that's in LA. There's a lot of TV is shifting back to New York, but still, most of it's in LA. I think wherever you are, definitely try to go to the other place as much as possible and meet a lot of people. If you go to one city and your friend who's in this room goes to the other, visit each other and meet each other's friends in this business, because I promise you, if you will end up working with some of those people, or they will help you, that it does matter. to get to know as many people as possible. I will say this, if the goal is to be a writer, it goes back to what I said before. Figure out where you will be most productive. Because you can control putting yourself in a position to meet lots of people, and you can control how much time you have to write. That's kind of it. So figure out where you will get the most writing done. That's the most important thing. Just write every day.
You have a partner, Mike. Haven't you spent many meetings, pitch meetings or story meetings where you're on the speaker box and he's sitting in the
Not so much pitches, but we'll do a lot of general meetings nowadays where he's in the room, I'm on the phone, or vice versa. I hate pitching. I hate it. It is the worst thing. I understand why it's important. I was talking before about sort of the pyramid of people. There's a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid, and they're not the deciders. They can't hire you. Their bosses can at the top of the pyramid. But they determine if the boss reads your script. They're also, their job not just to have coffee and meet everyone, are these pitches, and take these meetings. When you are not in LA or whatever city they're in, you are preventing them from doing their job. They're not going to go to bat for you if you're not there playing the game with them. And a lot of times that involves pitching. For me, I just don't like pitching because it's not my comfort zone to be up there. It feels very like, dance monkey, entertain us. I don't like that. But it's important. I try as much as possible to turn the pitch into a discussion rather than just, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Because I find when you do that, you're just giving them something to reject. Like, you either like it or you don't, because we have it all worked out. Where if it's a little more fluid, a little more of a conversation, a give and take. We don't have it exactly all worked out in this part, but we know we want to see where this happens. That kind of, it sounds like I'm saying you don't need to have it all figured out. Just play a little game with them a little bit, leave them wanting more. It becomes more of a conversation. As much as possible, I try to pitch on the phone, which sounds very weird because it's obviously easier to pay attention to someone when they're standing right in front of you than listening to 15 minutes on the phone. When my friend and I pitch on the phone, though, we will write out the whole pitch like a script. And to the point where when we interrupt each other, tell them that story of whatever happened to you the other day. That's in there in the script. It's not like an interruption, but it's so natural. Like, other than like one of us coughs, everything else is written in there, and it works. So the other thing we try to do is just not have one person talk too much or too long. Just try to bounce it off each other as much as possible. We try to make fun of each other when we're pitching, just because if they're laughing, then they're having a good time. It's little sort of tricks like that, just to keep them engaged.
question here.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm a beach fan. I have two questions. What did you do? What were you involved in as an SC student? And my second question is how did you transition from doing your original screenplay to adapting these the spectacular you have and John Green's books and I don't know, yeah.
When I was here, I didn't do very much, but I did three important things. One, I took all of your classes.
All of my classes.
No, it's true. It's not just the advice you gave me later on, but just things like learning the importance of an outline, which the same process I learned then that all these years later now, I won't write a word unless that outline feels airtight. And it's not to say there won't be some hiccups along the way, but it's so much easier to diagnose problems when you're looking at 8 or 10 pages than when you're looking at 75 and you're going, holy shit, I should have 50 pages ago done this thing. I have to rewrite all these 50 pages. I just spent 6 weeks that I wasted. Morale is so important to me because when you keep rewriting the same thing over and over again, you will fall out of love with it and find reasons to hate it and abandon it. I need to get it done as quickly as possible. And recognizing all of that was something that happened here in your classes. The other thing I did was I was a big nerd. I watched a million movies. Any old movies I can get my hands on. And there were days I watched 3 movies in a day. I just was watching the movies of the 60s, the 70s, and then even earlier, as a kid, I watched a lot of crappy movies. I wasn't like a 15-year-old film nerd. Here is where I sort of fell in love with classic movies. And that matters. That when you are trying to be a creative person in this business, and not just as a writer, as a creative executive, a director, a producer, the best at their jobs speak a creative language of movies. You're talking about, this scene isn't working, and I want it, we're trying to get it to be like that scene in Forrest Gump where, you know, when he, like, you speak in the language of movies to other creative people. And if you can't do that, you won't connect with other creative people. So I was watching just every movie I can get my hands on. The third thing was, I was not the funniest person in the class. I was not the hardest working. I didn't have any connections, but I knew I liked hanging out with other people who cared about movies and cared about comedy, who liked just talking about this stuff. And another student, who I wasn't even that close with, he was a real gunner. He had internships right after freshman year in LA. He was doing stand-up, and he knew people. I mean, it was intimidating, because I'm like, I don't know anyone, I don't know what I'm gonna do. This guy already has a leg up. He formed a group, he was one of Evan's students, and he just kind of loosely formed a group of us who weren't all friends, but we were just people who liked comedy and liked movies and liked talking about this stuff. I think it started late in junior year. We would meet once a week at just one of the bars on like a Sunday or Monday night when it was empty. And we would sit around and just talk about the shows we liked and the movies we watched that week. And watch this movie. By senior year, we started doing it. It was still maybe like 10 or 12 of us. And then we started giving each other little assignments. I mean, and they were stupid. It was like, everyone come up with a little top 10 list about something, or write a little one-page sketch about something, or we would all watch Saturday Night Live and come in and be like, let's all talk about what worked and what didn't, which sketches we liked and which were just horrible. And that was a way to be around other creative people and just get excited about, hey, let's all do this. And a lot, I'm probably only stayed in contact with 2 of them over the years, but that feeling of, I like being around other people who want to do this was an important thing to feel here in a safe setting when we're not competing for jobs yet, when we're not like, everyone's stressing about the same, you know, there's no student loans, you know, it's a low pressure place to explore the stuff you're passionate about, meet other people who care about that stuff, and just see what you gravitate towards.
I just wanted to ask, how adapted are your scripts once they're picked up, and then what is your involvement in the production process?
And I realize that touches on, I forgot to answer the second part of your question, but I like adapting books. It's fun. Spectacular was the first one, and I've adapted a few since. Fault in Our Stars is the next one that's coming out, and there's a few in the works that we'll see. The fun thing about adapting a book is the first emotion that happens is you read a book and fall in love with it. You're like, oh my god, this would make a great movie. Where it's a little different on an original idea. You're like, okay, that's interesting. And then you immediately start thinking about the reasons why you shouldn't write it. That's at least me. And when it comes to an original idea, if I'm still thinking about it 3 days later, 5 days later, 10 days later, then I'm like, okay, I can't get this idea out of my head. With the book, it's just about, wow, this book's so good. This will just make a special movie. When we shot Spectacular now when we shot 500 Days Summer in 2008, came out in 2009, we talked about for years how 500 Days was our response to how Hollywood had been making romantic comedies, they were very stupid for a long time. And we wrote 500 Days for each other, just thinking, let's just write what would really happen in their relationship. And it was because we hated those early 2000 Kate Hudson romantic comedies, the early 2000 Jennifer Lopez ones, some of the Cameron Diaz ones. I mean, they were just so bad. And I don't. You would go to them and you didn't relate to them. They felt like they took place on another planet. And what happened to when they made them and they were just felt like the stuff you could relate to? And sitting around our relationship war stories were more interesting, relatable, and funny. The other genre we railed against were movies about teenagers because they stopped making them with any honesty. It just seemed like if they weren't about vampires, witches, wizards, or having sex with baked goods, then they weren't getting made. But I loved like John Hughes movies, and just there was a long tradition of making movies about young people that were honest that they went away from. And when we had wrapped 500 Days, which we were on set for the whole time because the director is the captain of the ship, and in this case we had a great relationship with him, and he said, I want you guys there. And we knew our role was to be barely seen and not heard from. And, you know, every once in a while they'd come and ask us something, why isn't this line working? But for the most part, we were on set of 500 to learn. But it was a great experience, and we wrapped. Our executive at Fox Searchlight said, I just read this amazing book, and you guys are always complaining about these goddamn vampires. You have to read this book. And we read it, and it felt like a John Hughes movie. That's The Spectacular Now. And even then, that took 5 years to get made. It started as a studio movie and became an independent film, and we had to kind of raise the money ourselves. It was a long, grueling process. And we were on set the whole time for that. In the case of Fault in Our Stars, we were on set for 2 weeks. The producer for that one was the captain of the ship, and they were like, we don't think the script needs any more work. We got it from here. We're like, cool. And understand as a writer, this is very collaborative, and sometimes you're going to be involved every single step of the way, and other times you won't be. No one goes to the movies to watch a screenplay scroll. Your script is a map so that filmmakers can go make a movie. And if your expectations are too high, I think you will be disappointed because it's just in terms of like that you're going to be in charge or you're going to be making decisions. I joke all the time, and I think I said this in one of the classes. You want to be the only cook in the kitchen to go be a sculptor or something like that where there's no other people involved. But when you make a movie, understand that everyone's going to come into the kitchen and bring some things. And some stuff's going to turn out better than you hoped, and some stuff maybe not as much, and some stuff just more interesting. And that's kind of this crazy process.
Mike, can we watch the trailer?
Yeah, sure.
Here, if I can make this work. It's gonna go dark.